Welcome to the Wild West. This is the War Pony podcast, where we are your trading post for all upcoming productions, connections, and tricks of the trade. I'm your host, Cassidy Honey, bringing West Texas to you. I'm a wife, mom, businesswoman, holistic equine therapist, and team roper. Relax and watch the sunset as we highlight events, consult on business, share knowledge of the industry, and talk to the legends and rising stars of the community. Join the tribe and make War Pony your one-stop shop for all things West Texas. We also have Katie, my co-host today, who usually is behind the scenes doing all of our podcast editing. We are grateful that she was able to make it out today so we can share this story with you. Well, welcome to the War Pony podcast. Today we have a special guest, Jerad Hofstetter. As y'all know, he is the Texas Tech coach. We actually had this interview scheduled about 2 months ago before some things went down, but there's a lot that we still want to talk about outside of what is going on. So we're very thankful that you still want to talk and be on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
For those of you who do not know, tell me a little bit about you and your personal career.
I originally, as a kid, I grew up in California, and my family didn't rodeo or anything, and we watched the NFR. We would always watch the NFR on TV, and I became a big Joe Beaver fan. I just loved watching him, and when we moved to Texas, there was a Joe Beaver roping school, and I'll never forget. That was my Christmas present. And
where are you from?
Well, I'm from Northern California, and then we moved to East Texas, over by Tyler, Texas, a town called Athens. And I met Joe, and that was my first school, and he helped me start to rope. And you know, out in California, a lot of kids don't rope much, and so I thought I was awesome, and I was big and strong. So I entered Barry Burke's junior roping, and I found out that I kind of sucked. And everybody else in Texas can rope. And a friend of my dad's was a big bulldogger, and he was talking to him, and he said, "Hey, you live in Athens. There's a Butch Myers there that was a world champion bulldogger, and he roped calves." And my dad saw Myers on the entry list for the next day at Barry's Junior Open, and it was Cash Myers. And he was like, "Well, let's stay the night and see if they're from Athens. Let's see if that's who they are." And so we stayed the night, and I went in there and I met Butch Myers, and he was like, "Man, you should come rope at the house," the whole deal. Well, come to find out, he lived about 3 miles down the road from me, and I went over there every day, and I got to roping with him and his son Cash, and the Myers family that summer, I mean, really, really turned me into a roper. And I didn't even realize that I had gotten better. And there was a roping that fall, and I didn't want to enter anywhere because I was so embarrassed. The one roping I went, I thought, I'll never rope in front of anybody again.
Not in Texas.
No, not happening. And I'll never forget Butch. And then my horse was hurt, and Butch, he said, "You need to go to that roping." And I was like, "No, I don't want to go." He said, "I'll pay your fees if your parents will get you there." I said, "Well, I ain't got a horse." He said, "I'll send you a horse that you've been riding also." And so I'm like, all right. So my parents said they'd take me. I go down there, and I won all 4 go-arounds, won the average, won the trailer. And I came back, and he said, "Well, how'd you do?" I said, "Well, I won a trailer." He goes, "What?" I was like, "Yeah." All
casual.
Yeah, and he goes, "Well," he said, "How much money did you win?" Because I told him I'd give him half his winnings, or the winnings. And I said, "Well, I won $4,500. And he goes, "Man," he said, "What would you like to own that horse you rode?" And I said, "Well, I can't afford it. You want $6,500 for him?" And he said, "You give me your $4,500, you can have him." So I went down there with nothing. I come home with a trailer and a horse, and that's
and that was like back when horses weren't, $100,000.
Right. That same horse today would have probably cost about $20,000-$25,000.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was, cloud nine, and that's really what set off my career. And I always went to Joe Beaver's roping schools, and the Myerses, they all had them. And I was a big roping school guy. I just loved schools. I would miss big ropings and big junior stuff to go to a good school. And and just kind of going through, and that's what got me started. And to this day, I still put on roping schools. And then as far as my rodeo career later, rodeo, and you grow up amateuring and high schooling, and you think you're good, and it just, you win all the time, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna make the NFR, and then I always knew I'd make the NFR. Nobody else probably did, but I always knew that I was going to rope for a living. And I'm big and slow and the whole deal, and so a lot of people probably didn't think so. But I rodeoed my rookie year with Cash, and he helped me a lot. I mean, just a huge, huge influence in my life, and helped me all the way through. We were like brothers coming up. And then I ended up winning the rookie that year. And the next year I was going to rodeo again. And, I always just won enough to go broke. Like, I just didn't rope
just good enough to get you to the next one.
Right. And I thought I roped good, but I found out I didn't rope that good. And
it's different when you're doing it for a living.
It is. It's different out there, and people try to tell you that. And same now, I try to tell kids, I'm like, you get ready to go to that next level. It's different. And they don't give you nothing. Those guys, they don't care what you look like. They don't care what you ride. They don't care what you pull up in. All they know is if they don't win, they don't eat. That's all that matters to them. It's their living, And that summer of 06, I met my wife, and that was the biggest blessing of my life. Getting to meet her, and I'll never forget Cash. He said, "Oh my gosh, your rodeo career's over. You met a barrel racer." He said,
absolute roper for sure.
Yeah, well, he's like, look at every guy that roped good and supposed to make the finals. They marry a barrel racer, and it all goes downhill, and so I'm like worried that that's what's going to happen to me, and so we get to dating and talking, and that fall I was hanging out here in Lubbock quite a bit, and Adam Gray was going to school here with her. And I called Adam Gray and I said, Adam, what's it like living in Lubbock? Like I think I'm going to ask Brittany to marry me, and I'm going to have to move up there. And he was like, Jerrad, you'll love it. And I'm like, I don't know. They tried to get me to play football, and I said, I'd never live in Lubbock, And sure enough, I proposed to Brittany, and we got married in the spring of 07. And
landed in Lubbock.
Yeah, we stayed in Lubbock. She hadn't graduated yet, and we got to plan a honeymoon. Well, I grew up with nothing. I mean, just and a lot of us didn't have anything. I mean, there's no excuse. But I have never been on a vacation in my life ever. And
rodeo, the horse. Yeah, rodeo on a vacation.
Yeah, it was just Yeah, it looking back in high school, I would go back to that. That felt like a vacation compared to now.
Now when it was on someone else's dime.
Yeah, just always heading going and having fun and competing. And I had not roped very good and didn't think I roped good enough, and I'd quit. I'd leased my good horse out to Cash, and I'd sold my other horse, and I was looking for a job for $5 an hour. I mean, I'll never forget. But I had a little money saved up, and I was ready to go on a honeymoon, and I was pumped about a honeymoon. Like, I'd never been on a vacation. Just, where are we going to go? And I'll never forget my wife. She goes, I've never rodeoed hard over the 4th of July. And I'm like, what? You want to rodeo for our honeymoon? And she said, yes, that's what I want to do. I was like, oh my gosh.
Sold your horses, you got nothing.
I had nothing, and
are you riding the barrel horse to calf rope off the barrel horse at this point?
Pretty much, and so she's like, well, that's what I want to do. I was like, well, I know how to enter. So I bought a horse from Kyle Hughes that was probably 25 years old, and it's way back as they come. And we entered over the 4th of July, and that summer, Brittany's first rodeo was Pecos, Texas that year.
Hot.
Yeah, it was hot. And she did good at Pecos, and she had a good force. She won like 18,000 over the fort. And I knew she would win. I didn't know she'd win 18,000, but I knew she'd win, so I'd kept entering us. And Brittany placed at 48 out of 54 rodeos that summer, and she makes the national finals. And I drove her, and she won like 58,000, and I won 51,000 that summer. And go ahead.
And so for those that don't know, like entering those rodeos, like what does that look like? You know, because you said you kept entering and you kept doing that. Like explain that process a little bit.
Well, you've got to enter so far ahead of time. So it's not like you can just like, oh, I did good this week, so I can go next week.
Yeah. So
if
it's
you're
a
not,
hope and a prayer.
It is, you know. And so, I mean, you can always doctor release and go home, you know, if it or whatever. But it was quite the whirlwind. And it's just funny, had I never met my wife and her want to not go on a honeymoon and wanted to rodeo, not only would she not have a back number, but we would have quit before our rodeo careers ever got started, really. And so I owe all my success later to my wife. And you know, and then the next year I made my first finals, and my wife's horse got hurt, and she kind of got to where she didn't want to rodeo anymore. And so, yeah, it was quite the.
What was that like sharing that experience with your wife, and then your wife being able to share that experience with you?
Man, it was the coolest thing ever. Like that's
like goals for sure.
It was the year we got married. Well, the first 2 years, like we were just, I mean, we both won. It didn't matter what we did. Like, and it was just amazing. Like we were just on cloud nine, and her parents, you know, like her parents helped her a little. She had a truck and a trailer, and they had a fuel card. And you know, in that second year, I was like, hey, I went to my father-in-law. I was like, hey, like, we both are rodeoing for a living. Like, you can't be paying for anything anymore. Like, that's not fair to you. And so I give him his fuel card back, and we took over payments on trucks and trailers, and we were paying rent at our own place. And I'll never forget that year in 2009. The horse was horse of the year in 2008, and the owners wanted to retire it. and my other horse had gotten sick. We had to put him down right before the NFR. And so I was horseless in 2009, and I bought a practice horse that I rodeoed on some. And 2009 was just the worst year. We took over all the payments, and I was on a practice horse, and I didn't win much. And like, we went from just everything going our way to, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to make it, you know? Yeah. And, but that practice horse ended up he was kind of a bronchi sucker, and, but he really fit me. And that's the horse I actually rodeo and made the finals on the next 2 times. So, but 2009, I did not make them, and it was rough.
Yeah.
So.
There's ups and there's downs. And I don't think, you know, everything that people see is just the highlights and all the things. And there's a whole nother side to it. You know, It's not always making the finals. It's not always having a good year. It's not always having a good season, or you losing a horse before a big event and things. And it's not just something you just get to replace.
You know, it's hard. Like, you start out rodeoing, and this is just my opinion, it's something you'd set your goals for and dreamed about and done. And, you know, learning to get past that and realize it's your job, you know, and that's the difference. For me, you get out there and you're just going and going and going and hanging out with your friends and this and that. But then when you realize it's your job, the making the NFR and all the things you win, or winning a rodeo here, you know, or whether you win Cheyenne or Houston or San Antonio, whatever it is, that's not honestly what I miss about rodeoing, and that's not what I loved about the rodeoing so much. And I think most people that rodeoed will tell you this, and I wasn't a gold buckle guy, so, you know, it's a little different, and I just didn't rope good enough, and that's my own fault. But the relationships that we have met, and the friendships of rodeoing, is what I've gotten out of rodeo more than anything. For me, the friendships nationwide, and, you know,
it's a very common thing that people always say is the rodeo family is a different family.
It really is, you know, and it just, and now, you know, my kid's starting to rope, and so you're starting to see the people you rodeoed with again, and it's opening those, yes, you know, and it just opens that back up. And so that's my biggest experience. I wish I would have had some better NFRs. Later in my career, I look back, and Butch Myers always told me this. He always said, a goal is not a goal until you put a date on it. and believing that what you can accomplish is huge. And like I look back later on some things, and I never truly understood what Butch had said, but I'll never forget when my wife rode out in the 10th round in 07. I remember I was roping with a guy named Joey Helms, and he was the first guy that truly told me I was going to be good. And I'll never forget him telling me that in high school. And when Butch and Cash were rodeoing, he would help me. And he's a huge father figure in my life. And I still am very close to him to this day. And him and his wife let me move in with them in high school and the whole deal. Well, I remember I called him when I pulled out of Vegas, and I said, come hell or high water, I will be roping in this building next year. And I didn't know it then, but I look back and I'm like, that was the day I put the date on it.
Yeah.
And I did, and it's just funny how you look back, and I'm sure it's in anything anybody does. You always kind of look back and see what, you did good or bad. But it didn't matter what anybody else thought. I was going to be there. And then, and the other one that hits me huge is, and I hope he doesn't take this the wrong way, because I mean it as a compliment. Tyson Durfee. I was going somewhere with Tyson Durfee. We were catching rides together or something. And Tyson's always been just a roping sucker and very dedicated to his roping. And I'll be honest though, which if you rope for a living, you don't think anybody ropes better than you. If you don't have that confidence, then you probably ought to go do something else.
You've got to be. I mean, there's difference in confidence and cocky for sure.
There is. And it didn't matter. I'm not going to say I was the best roper, but if I backed in the corner, there's never a doubt in my mind that I wasn't going to win, and it didn't matter who the best in the world was. I would have matched them any day. Now, whether I win or not, that's another story. I don't know. But I remember going across there, and to me, Tyson roped good. And I mean, he's a guy that, I admired in his roping and everything. And, but I didn't think he roped any better than me or anything, and I remember him talking on the phone, and he was talking to sponsors, or a sponsor, I think, and I don't know who it was. And he was just telling him, he said, when I win the world, this is why you're going to want to sponsor me. You're going to want this. You're going to want this. And because when I win the world, and I'm going to win the world, you're going to want your name on my shirt and blah, 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 blah. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and I'm like, this poor guy thinks he's going to win the world.
He can't, because I am.
Well, no, I wish I would have thought that way. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And I'm like, he ain't going to win the world. This guy ropes good, but he ain't a world champ, And years after I quit rodeoing, Tyson Durfee wins the world, and it's fun, and he's so deserving of it. And like I said, I hope he doesn't take this the wrong way, because I mean it as a compliment. Well, I learned something that day. The reason I never had a good finals is since I was 14 years old, nobody thought I was going to make the finals, but I always knew I'd make the finals. I would have told you, you as a sponsor are going to want to sponsor me because I'm going to be at the NFR.
Yeah.
But I never once in my life remember saying I was going to win the world. And Tyson always knew he was going to be a world champion. And that's why he is one. I truly believe that. And I'm so thankful I got to be in that truck with him that day and have that thought, because I'm so proud for him, and
speaking it into existence and believing in yourself.
Yes. And it just shows that if you're a glass is half full kind of person, you will succeed. Yeah. And I'll never forget that. And that's some of the coolest moments, I guess, in my rodeo career.
So, did you ever see yourself becoming a college rodeo coach?
No.
How did that come apart?
It was, so my wife and I, we had joined a church life group here in Shallowater, and we had just moved here, and we were really just kind of wanted to get involved, meet more people. We lived in New Deal before, and we had moved over here to Shallowater, and we're in a great life group and good people, and to be a rodeo coach, you have to have a degree, and I don't have one. And and my wife had went to Tech, so we were always paying attention to the rodeo program, and it was just kind of a mess. Um, they in 3 years they went through like, let's see, I think they went through 5 coaches in 3 years, and it's kind of an impossible job if you want to know the truth. There's the university doesn't give any financial support.
And has it always been that way?
It has. They came up with money to hire a coach. I don't know when. His name was Chris Gay, and he was there for a long time, and he had some success. But
when did you kind of take over that coaching position?
I think it was fall of 18. This would have been my 7th year as a coach. But I think it was fall of 18, and so we were hanging out that summer, and one of the girls in our life group, she was running the equestrian center at that time, and she said, "Hey, do you know anybody that could be a rodeo coach?" And
because they also have other horse college, what'd you call it, sports?
they have equestrian,
they have other equestrian
stuff. Yes.
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't know anything about that stuff until I got out there.
Yeah.
And I just remember telling her, I was like, you know what, I'll call around, see what we can find. And because I sold some horses, and I helped kids here, and rode horses and stuff, and still amateur and stuff around here, but never planned on being a rodeo coach. And so I got back with her. I was like, I bet I'll call 40 or 50 people. Nobody will take this job. Like, nobody will be the rodeo coach because there's no money. It doesn't pay very good, and there's no money. And so
in the program itself,
you know. And so, and I'd come back and I said, I don't know what to tell you. Well, I'd walked off to go talk to some other guys or something, and my wife said, Jerrad would do it, but he doesn't have a degree. And she goes, let me ask. And so she'd come back. She said, he needs to put in his resume. And I was like, because I guess the ranch horse coach at the time had done a really good job, and he didn't have a degree either. And his name was Chance O'Neill, and he was a good guy. And so anyway, so I put in, and they hired me, and that's kind of where it started. So yeah, it was not something that I set out to be, but I do enjoy helping kids, and I do know that God always has a plan for you, and I always believe that that's what God had intended for me to do, was to be that, even though I fought it. And it's funny,
There's a reason 40 people didn't answer or take the call.
Right. Yes. And it just, I don't know what his plan is yet, but I've learned to just sit back and let him take us.
What is your favorite part of being a rodeo coach?
Man, it's the kids. The getting the opportunity to be around a bunch of kids and to watch their lives change and what they go through, and it's a pretty vulnerable time in their life. And
a lot of them, that's the first time away from home, and some are not even states, some are countries away from home.
Yes, and I truly believe any coach would tell you that that the best part is always the kids and the group and being around them. And that's hands down for me the best part.
Have you had anybody that you have coached that has had a very successful professional career?
Not yet. I've helped a lot of people that have won, but really a lot of my students that have always taken it very serious were very young. But I have several right now that are going to be out there and dang sure have a chance to make the finals. And I've helped so many kids that rope so good. And
but you've had good college finals.
We've had good finals, and we've had good kids. We've had people that could make the finals, and talent's a funny thing. I've helped a lot of kids with talent, and I had a guy tell me one time, he goes, and they said, do you know what ability is? And I said, what? And he said, lack of talent. And he said, it doesn't matter. He said, it's all in your head, know? And so it just, there's a few kids that I help right now, that the world's gonna know, and I'm so proud for them. But they're the first group of guys that I've had that understand that going out there is not the same as being at home. And just because you beat so-and-so around here, you amateur, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Or even permit rodeoing and circuit rodeoing. You know, it's easy to beat Haven Medjid and Chad Mayfield at a rodeo that they don't care about, you know. But it's hard to beat them at Reno. It's hard to beat them, you know, at San Antonio. It's hard to beat them at the good ones.
What do you look for in like a college student when you're recruiting?
I tell them, every college student, I tell them, you've got to come, if you come here, you got to go to class and you're going to have to do more. And who you are as a person is more important than who you are in the arena. And so I might look for a different type of athlete than everybody else. But, you know, and if they want scholarship or whatever, they have to show me that they're dedicated to get better, because I don't have a lot of scholarship money.
Yeah.
And so we don't give money to freshmen, and we don't, you know, and so you got to come here and work your way up. And so really it's just who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Is the most important.
Would you say that your mental game is just as important as your physical game?
It's so important. And I'm, you know, and like I said, you the older you get, the more you look back at things that that have turned your career around or whatnot. And I'll never forget, I'm so thankful I got to rodeo in Cody Oles' generation. And Cody, you know, there's people can think what they want about him, but I learned a lot from him and Joe Beaver. And Joe Beaver was an influence coming up, but confident. You know, Joe was at the end of his career, and I'll never forget, like, I mean, he couldn't hardly get on a horse, but he's still making the NFR.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but it never crossed his mind that anybody could beat him, you know, and so mentally it's a lot. And, you know, and I think it was 05, 06 somewhere. And I can't, it might've been Scott Cormos had rode up to Cody Ole, and I could be wrong on this one. But I'll never forget, whoever it was told Cody, they're like, did you check the draw? Yeah, Cody, you did not get a good one. You got the one.
And instantly right there, you already start doubting yourself.
Of course, you know, and they're like, Cody, you got the one that hadn't had him faster than 17. He's kicked everybody, just been no good at every rodeo. He sucks. And I'll never forget that Cody, he said, well, I'm going to tell you what, that calf hadn't run Cody Ole yet. And
that sounds like something Cody would say.
It would. And, you know, and people can call it arrogance, but I'm going to tell you what, he was just
confident.
He was just confident enough. If he said it, he believed it. And he tied that calf in 7-8 or 7-9, wins the round, you know. And I remember watching, like, he ain't going to win nothing on this calf. And right then I'm like, man, how am I going to win if I can't learn to think like that? And
think like a winner.
You do, you know, and if you don't believe it, I mean, truly believe it, you can't just say it. You know, a lot of people say things, but if you don't truly believe it, it's not going to happen. You know, if it does, it's just a good day, you know. But so yeah, like that, I've learned a lot through that, and it's funny the little things that stick out in my mind. But yes, mentally, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Something I want to go back to is you said there's no funding through the school for the rodeo program. So what have you done? Like, where do those scholarships? Do the scholarships still come through the school with the children, or how does that kind of work?
So the school at Tech, anyways, it's, you know, so we're a club sport, and I don't know how all the other universities are. There's no operating money, not any operating money from the university. There may be a little through some endowments that donors have set up in the past, and there's a little at Tech. We have very little scholarship money that are through endowments set up at Tech, and then San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo gives a scholarship. Also, they give 6 $5,000 scholarships, and they have to go to Texas high school graduates, and so that's huge for us. Really, a $5,000 scholarship is our biggest scholarship. Well, that doesn't
get you very far at all.
That pays for about half your tuition or something.
Mm-hmm.
It costs about $12,000 a year before living to go to school here, and so you can't offer full rides. You can't. It's not there, and so that made it hard. And when I first took the job, I remember thinking, man, this ain't gonna work for me. These kids aren't gonna care, But what I learned being there is the kind of kid that we get at Tech, they're having to pay for it. And if you have your own investment, you're not going to let that fail. And these kids prove me, and it doesn't matter their financial background. It doesn't matter if they come for money, don't come for money. The kids that come here have the greatest work ethic and
the drive.
They do. And I know there's that at lots of schools. I'm not singling us out.
Of course.
But this group right here has truly amazed me. And that first year, there was 18 kids on this team. And I showed up, and I believe we were negative $3,500. We owed $3,500 in bills, and there was no money. And we hadn't got a practice calf. We hadn't bought a sack of feed. We had nothing.
And it's not cheap to rodeo.
It is not. And so I had some people staying at my house that had a bunch of calves, and they had a little money, and they enjoyed that I was helping some kids. And I said, hey, could you help us with some calves? And he was like, yes, I'll help you with calves, and we won't charge the school. We'll do it all. And I said, okay. And he was like, I'll even pay for the feed. I'll do it all. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then my buddy, Forrest Elder, he rodeoed for Tech. And I called him and I said, hey, I'm in debt and we got no money. And he said, how much do you need? And I said, 5,000 would be huge. And he goes, I'll wire you 10 grand in the morning. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so we got the 10,000 and we started, just trying to figure out what to do. And we were like, man, and I sat that team down, and I'll never forget this first group of kids. There just wasn't very many of them. And
so 18 of them,
there
right?
was 18, and all 18 of them were the grittiest, toughest, and they wanted something big. Tech had been talked bad about. The rodeo deal was no fun. They've been through coaches every year. Just these poor kids had just been beat up, chewed up, and spit out. Like I felt so bad for them.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in a meeting and I said, hey guys, if you guys aren't afraid to work, we can do some cool things. We can have ropings. We can, if you guys will all go out and raise money for your rodeo, everybody needs to get $1,000. And I said, I will go and ask for money. We'll do this. And their rodeo had lost money every year. It cost $40,000-$50,000 to put one on, and they'd raise 15 or 20. And they just had no money to do anything with. And they didn't have any support.
That's when it was still at the equestrian center.
It was, yep. And they had it at the center because they didn't have any money.
Yeah.
And there's just no place to have it. And so I'll never forget, we got out and started busting our butts, and I met a couple people. I met one particular person, BJ Lewis here in town, and he has 80 Auto, and he's partners with Shag on some stuff. And Forrest had told me, he goes, hey, there's a guy that donated to me when I was in school, and he has a car deal out there. You need to find him. And it was BJ. And I went and met with BJ, and he goes, hey, because our biggest sponsor packet back then was $1,000. That was the most you could do. He said, I'll give you 5,000. And he just loved what we were doing. And I was like, my goodness. And he's like, and I'll call some guys. They'll put up some money too. And my advisor at the time, her name was, and she still has been up until about a year ago, Kelly Riccatelli. And I'll never forget, we're about 2 weeks before the rodeo, and she was nervous. She said, how are you doing on money for the rodeo? And I said, I think we're good. I said, we've raised about $65,000. And she nearly fell down. She said,
she was ready to be in the hole.
She was.
Yeah.
And she had sat in meeting after meeting, because there's no money. There's no money to feed cattle. They have dead calves everywhere and sickness. And and just, it was a train wreck. They didn't have any equipment
the stuff that you don't realize that still has to go on.
Oh, it costs so much, it costs so much to run an entire program. And I'll never forget, she was like, Jerrad, you're telling me you have enough money to have the rodeo before it started? And I was like,
what kind of rodeo person are you?
Yeah. And I was just sitting there going, yeah, like, is that not my job? Like, And she said, and I don't know how long she had been there, but she said, as long as I've been here, they've never raised enough money to put that rodeo on. Somebody's had to bail them out every year. And I was just young and dumb and didn't have a clue at how this all worked. And after doing it a year or two, we've made it work 2 years in a row. And I'm just like, honestly, having that rodeo before we got there and actually raised enough to do it, it actually hurt the program because they couldn't raise enough to put it on. And then the donor would have to come in and bail them out. And then they didn't have any money to function on the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And so
y'all's rodeo is in October.
It is. It's fall,
so you still have a whole nother season after that.
Yes. And so it was just crazy. And I'm so thankful that Tech had kept that rodeo, that they had kept it in all these years, because how they kept it, I don't know. I don't know how the school didn't just say, give it up.
Yeah, especially if they had a kind of track record.
Yes, and so we did that 2 years, and then me and the people that were doing the calf deal, they had a falling out, and we still didn't have no money. Like, it cost everything we raised to get through a year.
You're just trying to break even at this point.
And so I'd always kept a line of credit at the bank, and I was like, well, I'll do the calf deal. And, it's a money losing sucker. Like,
don't get into the calf business.
Do not get into the rope and calf business. It is
a hobby. It is not a business.
Oh my gosh. Lightweight calves. I don't care who you are, how you take care of them. They die.
Forget it. Well, and you are in Lubbock. So, you have a little bit more greenery and grass, but it's still not luscious, and turn them out, and you still fight elements too.
No, I agree. And I remember I bought enough calves for the team, and they didn't have any money. So deads, I just ate it, Well, my wife, we did that for, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2 years. And she was like, Jerrad, you make $50,000 a year at the school, and we lost $50,000 on calves. And she goes,
this ain't going to work.
She's like, at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to raise enough money and let somebody else do the calves.
Yeah.
and that second year, we had a pretty good rodeo at the fairgrounds. We moved it that year, and we had a falling out with the
Cooks.
No, there's a fairgrounds here. It's
and it's over.
Yeah, on the east side of Lubbock. Yeah. Okay, they got that blue barn.
Yes, they call it. I remember that. That's
Charlie
right.
Thompson used to have Saturday nighters over there.
That's where that was.
So we had it there, and we kind of had a falling out with them that just, and honestly, they were great. It was too many people. It overwhelmed them. There was just too much going on. That place wasn't built for it.
Yeah.
And the next year we were going to come back to the equestrian center, and COVID hit, and I was like, guys, I don't know what to do. Well, a guy on the committee, he is very close. 2 guys on the committee are very close with the owners of Cooks. We had talked to him about doing a 4th of July rodeo, a fundraiser for the rodeo program. And so we do that, and they were like, yeah, let's do it. And there's some grass out there, and
a little bit more parking, and it's a lot easier for people to get in and out. At the equestrian center, it's pretty tight.
It is. The equestrian center is not designed for rodeo. It's really not designed for spectator events, period.
Right.
But if that's all you got, that's all you got.
Yeah.
And so we started having committee meetings out there, and Cooks was like, hey, let's do it. Let's have the college rodeo here.
Now, did Cooks already have the arena at that point?
No, they still don't. Okay. They do not have an arena.
They just panel it and make it, right?
Yeah. So
they build it for every rodeo, don't they?
Yeah, we do. So Jed Middleton, he's on our committee, and he just gets on the internet to find a rodeo arena. And he finds this guy, and he's like, this guy said he'll bring it down here. So we rented an arena, and
what y'all do for dirt?
that cooks. They have a paving company, and so they handle the dirt for us.
Yeah.
And but I'll never forget, we were going to just do it out in the pasture and just work it up and then be done. Well, we're having a committee meeting. They got a patio there that kind of overlooks the parking lot, and this was before they built that big stage that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And we were just hanging out, and I was like, where we're sitting right now needs to be the VIP room. It's like that arena needs to run right here on this pavement. And they were like, man, that ain't gonna happen. Like, I'll never forget them saying, there's just no way.
Yeah, no.
And
like, who do you think you are?
Yeah, even Trevor Cook, it's his mom and his uncle that own it and run it. And he's like, there's no way. There's just no way. And Andy Keys, he's a guy on our committee, and he's real close to them. And he said, I'll call and ask Rusty. Like, and everybody's like, he's going to say no. He's going to say no. And I'll never forget, he had him on speakerphone. And he said, Rusty, we think we need to have this rodeo right on this pavement parking lot. And Rusty goes, I don't give a shit. Let's do it.
Here we go.
And I'll never forget that, And that right there was the call that turned this program around. It put us on the map. It was COVID. Nobody else could have a rodeo, or, it was hard to put one on.
Yeah, they had all the certain regulations and the outdoors and how to have certain things.
Yes, and there was a lot of pushback from the university. And I'll never forget, my boss at the time was Dr. Orth, and he was a great guy. And he had called and he said, hey, the school's telling me you can't have that rodeo. Like, it's starting in 15 minutes. And I mean, it was a lot of work. We poured and volunteers, parents, and town community involvement, like, just was amazing. And we still didn't have very many kids. We were probably up to like 40 now. And I'll never forget. And I said, Dr. Orth, just fire me on Monday, but I'm not putting this rodeo on. And I'll do it. And he's like, what? And my phone died. And I'll never forget. And Chuck Center was on the advisory committee. And he goes, hey, Dr. Orth's on my phone. I said, my phone died. I said, I ain't talking to him.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it. And so
it's like, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. So
yeah.
Sorry, here
yes,
it is.
And I've done that some, and I've gotten in trouble for it some. And so I'll never forget, we had that rodeo that night. And the next day, Dr. Orth drove out there to watch. And he's like,
who is that?
He was the chair of the ag department.
Okay.
And he said, hey, and I was like, Dr. Orth, I'm so sorry. My phone died. I did not hang up on you. I said, but when you called Chuck, I did tell him my phone's dead and I'm busy.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's okay. It's okay. Everything's fine. He said, if you had to stop, I would have stopped. I said, okay. And I'll never forget that, like, he was so cool. And everything ended up good. And it was a really, really, and at that time there was a lot going on, because was that an election year also?
Yeah.
There was.
I mean, that was the year the world shut down.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
and it
that was a year.
Oh.
Margaret McCollum was like, I'm about to rewrite hell of a year. Like, it was bad.
It was. And it was so bad. And right then there was all those rallies and Cook's Garage, and it was so political, and there were so many race issues. And,
yes.
And it was crazy.
The world got flipped upside down to what it was.
It really did. And it was sad, and
I don't think we still really truly have fully recovered.
I feel like I don't see it as much. I feel like it's
gotten better.
Our country is very divided politically.
And I think that is where.
But that year, it just seems so different, and I'll never forget, that's why they didn't want that rodeo. There was so much publicity. Say, I can't believe the university would have an event, and they were all calling it Crook's Garage, and I'm like, and I'll never forget, the president ended up coming, and everything was so patriotic and so just, that's a farming group of people. All the people at Cook's, and they rode motocross and they farm, and I didn't realize they are a very country-based group, and they're the most giving, loving, any second chance given group of people I've ever met. and just such a blessing to get to meet them and be a part. And I'll never forget when we had asked about having it, Misty was like, as long as you guys will clean up. And so those kids, man, like we put that rodeo on and we cleaned everything up and we did anything she asked throughout the year. If she needed something, kids would be bolting over there. Like that group of kids knew and understood how fortunate we were to have that opportunity. And it was pretty amazing. And so, there we were. We had a rodeo at Cook's Garage,
I want to say, if you think about it, those are the kids that didn't get a graduation that year either from high school, if they're coming in as a freshman, because they would have graduated in May.
That'd be correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's really what put us on the map. And people started realizing we had a rodeo team. I mean, we would do excuse letters and kids would come to me and their teachers would say, we don't have a rodeo team.
What is rodeo?
They have no clue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nothing. And, and it's constant. I had no idea being a rodeo coach. And it's the same everywhere. These coaches, they get put in bad spots because there's no money. There's no money, and it costs a lot to run a rodeo program, a lot of money. And so it's just a constant fundraising job.
Yeah.
And I am not a good fundraiser. I am not. I struggled with it in my rodeo career. I didn't have sponsors.
It's hard to ask for money.
It is. And I'm not, and I'm not somebody to brag about something that I don't 1000% believe in. And it was hard for me. It was hard for me to ask for money. And one thing that I learned, I bought into this group of kids and what we were doing so much, because asking for money for those kids is probably the easiest thing I've ever done. And that's where I knew that I had found my spot. Like, I love what we're doing. My wife loves what we were doing. The donors and supporters just absolutely loved what we were doing. And we would have events. We started a kickoff party because I'm like, if you donated, I want you to meet these kids.
Yeah.
Like, see where your money's going. Like, I want you to go hang out, have a kid at your dinner table, eat with them, like, see who they are, because they are hands down the best part of this program. It's not me. It's not the university. It's not
the kids
anything.
Make the program.
They do. And I know that's everywhere. You can go to any school. I don't care if there's 5 kids or 100 kids. It's the kids, and I think any coach would tell you that. And that's it. It's something that I was like, man, this is something I didn't know I would do,
Yeah.
And so the next year we kind of learned, like, the bigger we go, the more people want involved. And they had changed. They built a big old stage out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, what's that going to do for a rodeo? Like, I don't know. And so we were like, we're going to run north and south, and we're going to do a bigger arena. It was a little tiny arena the first year, but we went a big arena the next time. And we made that stage the VIP area. And what did
that VIP area get you?
You get free meals, you get steak dinners, you get your own bars up there. Better view, you're elevated. It's just kind of the spot everybody wants to be. Yeah. You can see the rodeo good. It's really, it was a fun deal, just a fun time. And we also, more than just taking care of our kids, that rodeo turned into something. We wanted to give all college kids in this region an opportunity to feel like what it was like to compete at a real rodeo. Like, the majority of these kids, when they graduate college, they're not going to rope at they're going
to start a career.
Right. They're not going to go to San Juan or San Antonio or Houston or these major rodeos. And we wanted to create that atmosphere. And still, even though we had moved to Cooks that first year, we still barely got by. And we were trying to help with the ABC rodeo here in town, and not all of them. That's a great group of guys. But when we were helping, they were really rude to us. They were rude to my kids, and they kind of treated them like they worked for them. And we were just volunteering, And Binion Servi is our contractor. And I said, Binion, what if we put on our own pro rodeo? would that be something you'd be interested in? He goes, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's have this thing. I'll do it for as cheap as I can to get this thing started.
Yeah.
And when we added the pro rodeo to that deal, that's when the money came in.
Yeah.
It was like, and what's funny, it was, and the pro rodeo, honestly, more people come to the college rodeo and enjoy the college rodeo more. But the sponsors and the donors, as soon as we said we were having a pro rodeo, they said, how much do you need?
Yeah.
And of course, it was all for such a great cause. But, people hear pro and they want to involve. They want it there. And that's the first year we actually profited a little money and brought in good money. And we got to build some things at the equestrian center. We got to spend money out there. We got to start putting back into this
really
program.
Kind of was your pivotal point that changed.
It was. We were just
program.
Barely getting by. And everything that we put into, we had to have it. Like, we needed more pins. The team was growing. And so every year in the fall, we're broke. We're broke again. Like, it didn't
start all over.
It did. Like, it was all over. But everything, because we pay for all maintenance, we pay for upgrades, we pay for you name it, we pay for it.
Thank you for listening to the War Pony podcast. If you have a story to tell or want to be a sponsored ad on our podcast, you can always contact us at Cassidy@warpony.co. That is CASSIDY @warpony.co. Or you can always find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at WarPonyCo. Well, that brings us to the end of the part 1 out of 2 episodes for Jerad here. If you guys will stay tuned, we will drop the next episode tomorrow at the same time, the same places, where we will go a little bit more into the heart behind college rodeo. Stay tuned.